From baggage claim to pajamas in 10 minutes. Erie International Airport. Fly with ERI.com.
Fly Erie International Airport to Charlotte on American Airlines, your nonstop gateway to the world. Also, we have Breeze Airways flying nonstop to Orlando and Tampa, Florida. A great low-cost carrier providing excellent service to the regional community. Fly Erie International for your travel needs.
Fly with ERI.com.
Get paid to drive. Start a new career behind the wheel at the EMTA. If you are looking for a high-paying and rewarding career with full benefits and paid training, stop by or apply online today with the EMTA. Plus, EMTA riders can now enjoy free Wi-Fi on new, clean, and environmentally friendly buses to travel all over Erie County. Visit ridethee.com for more information.
Get on board EMTA. Get on board EMTA. Get
Welcome to TalkErie.com's Joel Natalie Show, Erie, Pennsylvania's daily podcast. Every day, we tackle the biggest issues that the Erie PA region faces. Stay informed and involved as we advance the narrative of Erie. Now, here's Joel Natalie.
Okay, as part of our coverage of the Making Waves on Main Street, the Pennsylvania Revitalization Conference is happening right here in Erie at the Bayfront Convention Center. We've got Julie Fitzpatrick. She's the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Downtown Center. Thanks so much for joining us, Julie.
Great. Thanks for having us, Joel.
All right. Tell us a little bit about where you're from in the Commonwealth here and what brought you to this role.
Yes. So our office is actually in Harrisburg, so it's important for us to have a presence in our capital city. And we are a statewide nonprofit that works throughout Pennsylvania in small boroughs and larger cities and kind of everywhere in between. So we focus on mostly downtown revitalization and neighborhood revitalization through the programs known as Main Street and Elm Street. We partner at the state level with the Department of Community and Economic Development, and at the national level with an organization called Main Street America, a subsidiary of the National Trust for Historic Preservation.
So if I'm living here in downtown Erie, or if I'm, let's say, in Edinburgh, what's the value add that the Pennsylvania Downtown Center gives to somebody like me?
So I think one of the things that we focus on is really working with the nonprofit organizations who are partners with local boroughs and county governments, and really help to build those public-private partnerships. They're often the connector between maybe developers, business owners, colleges, universities, institutions, and local government. So they're kind of the glue that holds everybody together, but they're often the impetus. They often are those that are, they may have those ideas that, based off of our theme of making waves on Main Street, really trying to focus in on what big, bold ideas mean to communities. As a nonprofit, sometimes we have the ability to take on initiatives that maybe local governments can't or don't have the capacity to do themselves.
Now, in Erie, the Erie Downtown Partnership is almost like a special that's one of the things, is that they're able to add tax and do major investments. But many of these are they volunteer organizations? I'm thinking of the organization in Union City, where a lot of the driving positivity is coming from volunteers, like you say, in a public-private partnership with the municipal manager or something like that.
Sure. Yeah, so the Erie Downtown Partnership is actually a neighborhood improvement district or a business improvement district. They have been created and use, it's actually a statute that we have here in Pennsylvania, where they have the ability then to, like you said, assess property owners. And for that assessment fee, then they can take on additional projects that will help the property owners, help the business owners. We have improvement districts that could help other residents and homeowners, but they have not everybody is an improvement district, but we do have other downtown business or neighborhood improvement districts throughout Pennsylvania who can really fund these initiatives through that mechanism. The great thing about these organizations is that they all have volunteers. We can't do this just as through staff of nonprofit organizations. So whether or not you have volunteers and staff or just volunteers, this is a very volunteer-driven initiative. So it is important that we have those local leaders who are really kind of spearheading these initiatives. I think what's also exciting is that so many of our programs really do leverage funds. So where municipalities are limited often in, how they generate their revenue through taxation, and maybe are able to leverage through grants and that sort of thing, whether it's state or federal. Our local nonprofits that is their mode. They're always thinking, how do we stretch that dollar, and how do we make things work for, bringing more partners into the conversation. And so I think that's really a strength of a lot of these initiatives. So this program, this mode for community revitalization, this approach can work where you have multiple staff members, and it can also work where you only have a volunteer organization, but still have the framework so that you can accomplish a lot with a little.
Talk about who's coming to this conference here. Yeah. Where are they coming from, and what are the again, they're all part of these little, I shouldn't say little, but they're part of these partnerships across the state? Yeah,
so we actually have community development corporations and organizations from Philadelphia, from Pittsburgh, from Wilkes-Barre, from Scranton. Thankfully, we've got a lot of people from the Northwest who are coming to Erie. We have actually hit record numbers for our attendance, which is exciting. Yeah. We have a lot of people where this was their first chance to really visit Erie, and just are so grateful they came, because it is such a beautiful place. But it's also a place where we can learn, where a community, when they come together and develop these partnerships, can really make an impact in the world that they live in. And so this is our third time in Erie for a conference. The last time was in 2019. So to think about how far they've come, not just in the investment, but also in the cooperation and the collaboration among these different organizations and entities. So our folks really are here representing nonprofits. We've got elected officials, we've got mayors, we've got county planners, we've got a lot of state agencies who are represented. We've got board members and volunteers and business owners and developers. It is an incredibly diverse selection of individuals who are all trying to make their homes, their hometowns, their communities, their neighborhoods better places.
I notice on the agenda there's a few immersive events. Yeah. Talk a little bit about that. In fact, that's my next stop, is to go where our studio is at 5th and State. They're going to make kind of a smart street or something like that. Talk about it.
Yeah, so this afternoon and our evening event is actually going to be right there, where it's a tactical urbanism project.
Okay.
So we often talk about things that can be done lighter, quicker, and cheaper. Sometimes we need to create things so that people can see the impact before people can buy in. So we recognize that in many cases we're trying to put in place things that are providing long-term investment, but sometimes we need to do these quicker projects so folks can see that the community is bought in, that they too can be part of the solution, and these are great ways to really engage the greater community. So we see this, and this type of initiative can work again in urban cores. It can work in our small rural communities as well, and it's as much as it is about the space, it is also about how people utilize the space. It's the fact that we're trying to create places that people feel safe and welcoming, that are gathering places. When we think about public space and other places, we think of third spaces. Mm-hmm. Our first space is our home. Our second place is where we work, and in COVID, those two kind of merged together, right? But when you think about what are those kind of often free places where you can go and maybe meet new friends or meet up with old friends, it used to be the pub it's the barber shop, it's maybe the library, the farmer's market, the nail salon, church for sure, the coffee shop, right? So, but if we're trying to also create some of these spaces that are publicly available and that are free and open to everyone, the tactical urbanism is a really great way to kind of catalyze some of these projects and initiate those efforts.
I've got Julie Fitzpatrick with us from Pennsylvania Downtown Center. Talk about policy. Is Pennsylvania and the Commonwealth and the DCED, are we at best in class when it comes to policy for these urban centers?
I would say we're close to the top, yes, if we're not. We have a lot of other states who are watching what we're doing, and we have a rarity right now where our governor is incredibly supportive of the programs and the policy that help us and impact the work that we do. We recognize, though, that these issues are not partisan. These are bipartisan issues, and so whether you are a state senator or a representative from a larger urban core or a smaller rural community, this is a bipartisan. This is not just a downtown or just a small town. These are really issues, and the tools that we're able to utilize to help benefit these communities are helpful at whatever scale they are. So I will say that other states are watching what we're doing. There's always room for improvement. Sure. And the interesting thing about community planning is it's not just one kind of school of thought. We work with transportation planners, so we look at how to make sure the communities are more walkable, more bikeable, that they're safe for those with different mobility concerns, safe for those who might be 8 years old and 80 years old. We also recognize that affordable housing and market rate housing and providing housing choices and options are incredibly important to a healthy community. We recognize that economic incentives and tools to try to either catalyze new or different entrepreneurs in our communities is incredibly important, but we also have to support the businesses that are there, thinking about retention and then recruitment. And so when we're talking about policy, it's not just one area, it's not just one program. There's a lot of different policies that impact the work we do. There's a lot of different programs that exist here in Pennsylvania to support the work that we do. We recognize, though, that the demand sorely outnumbers the supply, so we could always use more funds and maybe more flexibility in communities that want, like for instance, that want to offer housing options, but the zoning that's currently in place is not supporting the kinds of more creative and I would say relevant and responsive uses that we have in 2026. So there's definitely opportunities for changing some things from a planning perspective and thinking about how land use and codes and zoning. But I will say that overall, we should be really grateful. We've got some fantastic leaders. We've got a great deal of funds that are benefiting our communities, but there's always more work to be done.
Finally, I want to ask you, we mentioned cities and boroughs, but we're seeing, especially around here, one of the largest townships in Pennsylvania is adjacent to Erie, Mill Creek Township, and they are coalescing around a main street on 8th Street, major development, major controversy. What's a smart way to navigate communication to the general public, especially taxpayers, when you're trying to, aim for the fences and go for that big, that big development or that big investment?
Well, I think it's important to always be thinking about trying to prevent displacement, right? And displacement sometimes happens. We often associate displacement with the word gentrification. And, it's really forcing people out. And that could be residents, that could be business owners. So if we kind of look backwards, what can we do and what is it that we want to end up with at the end? And looking backwards, what are the things that we have to put in place to get there? And so I think if we can approach it from that perspective, where everybody has a voice and can be part of developing that vision and developing that strategy and making sure that people businesses, residents all have the opportunity to receive services. That's really important. It can't just be benefiting like one group of people or one group of businesses. So, trying to think about it from the lens of equality and equanimity, and it can be tricky, right? A lot of times, and we do work in some townships that have like a core downtown, but a lot of times local government will do things that may not either be perceived to be transparent, or folks may just not feel like they haven't been paying attention, but they feel like the challenge is then they feel like they're not part of these solution, or they're not, being part. The community engagement piece is lacking. So how does local government make sure that the people who need to be at the table are at the table, and that they really are speaking on behalf of their constituents? And it can be tricky sometimes, for sure. The controversy does come up, but I think there's also ways to build consensus, and so that maybe all parties can benefit from it, and that it doesn't have to be that someone wins and someone loses. How can we all benefit?
I appreciate it. Again, Julie Fitzpatrick, the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Downtown Center. Welcome to Erie. Thanks so much for bringing this amazing event here.
Thank you. We're thrilled. We couldn't have any more perfect weather, and we're just excited to be here, and everybody's having a great time. Thank you for hosting.
Hi there, my name's Samantha Pearson. I work for the Pennsylvania Downtown Center. I am the Healthy Communities Program Coordinator, and I'm here working on a pop-up demonstration project to improve street safety. It's just a one-block project for today on Fifth Street, but between State and French, but it's the idea of ways of making streets safer for pedestrians and all users, in fact, all over the city.
All right, let's start with the broad strokes of healthy communities. What does that mean to you?
So my primary responsibilities relate to a contract that we have with the Pennsylvania Department of Health related to something called WalkWorks. So I am mostly working on road safety, and the idea is we want to make our streets safer, in the process reducing injuries and deaths and crashes, and also increasing opportunities for healthy physical activity. In addition, getting more people able to and feeling invited to walk, bike, and get places where they need to go under their own power is a great way of improving social cohesion and those sort of weak social ties that improve community resilience.
Can I ask you about sidewalks here? Because that's a big issue in Erie, especially when the snow is 2 feet high.
Sidewalks are a big issue everywhere. You don't even need snow, but snow does call out the issues. In fact, there's a brand new book that's out right now called Sidewalk Nation, The Life and Law of the Nation's Most Underlooked or Overlooked Asset, or something like that. It just came out. It's looking really at the legal side of sidewalks. They are a puzzle. Basically, sidewalks are almost exclusively the responsibility of the adjacent property owners, even if they are not literally on their own property. It could just be what's called an abutter's property. So you abut the right-of-way, you're responsible for the sidewalk in front of you. A lot of people don't realize that that's also how our roads were originally handled. Many of our roads, especially like highways, they were the responsibility of the property owner across whose property the road went. We realized over 150 years ago that was not effective. It was creating just mud wallows, and it was really hard for farmers to get their goods to market. And so we created departments of highways, and we created departments of transportation. We are right now in a push and pull of advocates arguing that sidewalks also need a similar collective responsibility and acknowledgement. We are seeing that happen in other parts of the world, and even in some parts of the country and Pennsylvania.
All right, let's talk about some of the elements that you're building into Fifth Street to make it a safer situation.
Sure. So the top line thing that we worked with the Department of Public Works to do is they just installed some high visibility crosswalks at either end of this particular block. High visibility crosswalks include a lot more paint, but they're much more visible for drivers. Pedestrians, they're visible for pedestrians. The edge lines are also fairly visible for pedestrians, but making the crosswalk more visible for drivers highlights the presence or the possible presence of pedestrians. So that was one of the top things we did. We are also, and those are permanent paint, at least, permanent for what counts as permanent on any surface that motor vehicles drive over. In addition, we're doing a variety of temporary pop-ups. Right now, we've marked down what are called curb extensions. These are techniques of moving the curb in towards the center of the street, closer to the center line, acknowledging areas of the street that don't really need to have driving vehicles on them. So they're outside of what's called the cartway, the actual driving lanes, but that you might bump out where there's a parking lane. You might bump out at corners to sort of slow vehicles down as they turn corners, because that's one of the more dangerous places for pedestrians. You got a vehicle turning a corner, and they just don't see, they're not looking, or they're A-pillar in their vehicle, prevents them from seeing the pedestrians. So you want to really slow that down, make those interactions safer simply by reducing speeds. So we're doing those temporary bump outs. They're really just for today. We're using cornstarch paint. I am covered in cornstarch. Yeah. So those will be sprayed off, unlike the high visibility crosswalks. But if people do come by or they get to see pictures, they'll see sort of and we haven't put down, there'll be a broad edge, sort of that temporary curb, and then sort of decoration inside of that, just to highlight all of that area that should not be used for parking. It's too close to crosswalks. You're not allowed to park within 20 feet of a crosswalk. So this just is a way of highlighting that, doing what's called daylighting the intersection, so pedestrians are more visible. It also shortens the crosswalk, the practical crosswalk. The current crosswalk on this street is approximately, it's around 36 feet long. But if we do these temporary bump outs, you wind up with a crosswalk that is really only 22 feet long. And that just means that the pedestrians are not as exposed to motor vehicle traffic. The other thing that we're doing is we have a little temporary parklet build happening. So a parklet is a version of reusing street space. We're taking a parking space and we are making a park. Every September there's something called Parking Day, park with ING in parentheses, and for that internationally people are encouraged to put some money in the meter and do a pop-up park. So this is just a demonstration version of that. Once we're done with this, we'll be handing it off to the Erie County Parks and Recs Department, and they will be working with the city and looking at whether they can implement a parklet program. So people could ask for or implement parklets within certain criteria and guidelines in different areas as a part of a traffic calming effort.
Finally, how would you convince the public that this is net positives? I mean, I hear a lot of complaints about the bump outs. We have a bunch on State, usually around 14th, where the bus garage is, and it's like, oh, I didn't know that was coming, or, all that kind of thing.
So one thing I want to emphasize is that change it's just a natural thing for people to be like, it's different, it's suspicious, I don't like it.
Right.
And so we do encourage people to recognize that just sort of immediate reaction is totally natural, and that doing demonstration projects like this where people can sort of see it. Ideally, we would actually do this and then it would be up for like 2 weeks or something like that, with medium temporary paint, like more permanent than cornstarch, but less permanent than regular pavement marking paint. And then people could drive through it and sort of try it out. That's what demonstration projects really are. They're trying to give people a glimpse of what the concept is. Now, if people are objecting to curb bump outs that already exist, it may be that they are accustomed to driving across town at a higher speed than is maybe safe. Maybe they're used to cutting around the car that's turning left in front of them at an intersection. that might be a sort of habit that they have, and they may not be aware that in a place that maybe doesn't have as many people walking around, that might seem perfectly safe, but those are actions that make it less safe for people walking. And so if we want to increase health, increase economic activity, we want to increase that sort of life on the street, that's the kind of traffic that actually builds our communities, foot traffic, not road traffic. So we encourage people to park, get out of their car, and walk a few blocks to get where they're going.
I appreciate it, Sam.
Sure, great to talk to you.
At Quickfill, what matters most is that our customers, our communities, and our heroes are taken care of. We start by providing American-made gasoline, which means you can buy local, keeping America and your communities strong. We also support vital charities every year and hold Operation Give Thanks each November to help provide a better future for our veterans and their families. We're proud to support the communities we live and work in, and we're doing our best every day to make our towns a better place. Quickfill, driving America.
Looking for amazing finds and incredible deals? Visit Erie City Mission Thrift today. From stylish clothes and shoes to quality furniture and home goods, you'll discover something new each time while changing lives right here in Erie. It's shopping that feels good and does good. Come see us in Erie and Girard. Erie City Mission Thrift. Thrift with a purpose.
All year round, Frontier Home Products and Design has what you need to make your home comfortable and beautiful. Relax on a new timber tech deck designed by Frontier's experts. A new fireplace from Frontier Home Products Fireplace Gallery adds warmth and serenity to any home. Beauty and versatility at Frontier Home Products and Design Center, 4213 Peachtree, East 5th, next to the Bayfront Highway.
Frontier Home Products and Design Center. Discover a new frontier.
PA contractor number PA039007.
I've got Rick Vilello. He's the Deputy Secretary of Community Affairs and Development for the Department of Community Economic Development, DCED, for the Commonwealth. Thanks so much for joining us here on Talk Erie.
It's an honor to be here. This is a great location. Erie is so important when we look at the state. I've been to Erie a bunch, worked with, the former mayor and current mayor and administration. My department works with local government and the Main Street program and Main Street Matters. We support the downtown center and the heart of our communities are our main streets. So it's really important when we think about community development, and it is also important when we think about economic development. In today's world, people and businesses want to be in places that are special. So, the bridge between community and economic development is really important. And Erie is a highlight of that. And sitting in the Bayfront, converting old industrial sites into this tourist attraction is really, really important. And Erie is doing a fantastic job this week with highlighting what's here and what's special about Erie.
If I think about Lock Haven, you were the mayor of Lock Haven. How long ago was that, Rick?
I was the mayor for 4 terms from 2000 to March of 2015 before going to DCED. And, Lock Haven with rails and trails and the river and kayaking, all of that has been so important, and it creates an atmosphere where people want to live, and trying to do that statewide is really important.
I feel like, if as much of a place as any that represents kind of the true terrain of Pennsylvania, and you think about a Pennsylvania town, it's Lock Haven.
Well, and, the similarities, we had an international paper factory that left right when I was starting as mayor, and that redevelopment kind of tells the story. When we look at the different regions of Pennsylvania, whether it be coal or steel or paper or the fabric mills, the silk mills, the transitions that we go through in economies, and it's so important to bring those stories to different places and really think about what are we going to look like in 20 years? What are we going to look like in 50 years? And, how do we build places where people want to live?
Yeah. Talk again, a lot of emphasis on sense of place here and making sure that the downtown central cores are vibrant. But you got to have jobs to fund getting that $4 latte or that $8 craft brew, right? And one of the concerns I've had, and maybe you could weigh in on this, not to get too political, is just the fate of third-class cities in the Commonwealth. Again, a lot of attention paid to Pennsylvania or to Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, but the third-class cities like Erie, I would imagine Lock Haven's a third-class city. It's difficult to generate enough revenue just to keep the fire trucks running and the police cars and all the new public safety tech. Can you weigh in on that?
Yeah, I'm actually really, really optimistic. All of the local governments fall under my deputate at DCED. So, all the third-class cities, and I've really never been more optimistic. And people look at me like I'm crazy, but if there's a silver lining to the pandemic and the shutdown, the silver lining is people have a renewed interest in their main streets. The downtown conference is having record attendance, and 40% of the people here are first-time attendees because of the focus on place and the interest in downtown and restaurants and outdoor entertainment. And, when we think about how the workplace has changed because of the pandemic, if you could choose anywhere in the world to work from, why wouldn't you choose where the cost of living is lower, where you have access to rails and trails and kayaking and fishing and world-class amenities? And Pennsylvania can compete there. And we're seeing renewed interest in downtown living and walkability, and the millennials and the new generation, where they're choosing where to live before finding a job. And, before it was we have to be in New York City or we have to be in Philadelphia or Pittsburgh. And now places like Lock Haven, like Lancaster, like York, like Erie are on that decision map. So I'm really excited for the future and the opportunities. And, we have to do it right. We have to do it with long-term plans and not just on election cycles. We have to think about, where will our grandchildren want to live?
Yeah.
And I think, Pennsylvania is pretty special, driving here, through the Allegheny Forest and what the PA Wilds have built on. That's been 20 years and it's really starting to pay dividends. And we're on the international map when it comes to, people making those decisions.
But you need infrastructure. You need gigabit connections and all the things. Do you feel like we're keeping up with kind of the rest of the world?
Well, and with the investment in broadband, we're working towards with all of the broadband investment where every place in Pennsylvania will have access to high-speed broadband, that didn't have it before, and that's key to those investments and creating the gig economy into brick and mortar is really important, and the hybrid where places have both an online presence and a downtown presence is really important. And we'll be going to lunch downtown here in a couple hours, and some of the restaurants and the excitement around that, and it's a constant challenge. And I'm frustrated. One of the things that I talk about is every place I go around Pennsylvania, there's always the donut shop or coffee shop or place where the good old boys sit. And the good old boys talk about the 1950s or the 1960s or the 1970s as the golden years, and we're celebrating this coming week and the 250th birthday of the United States. And I say, think about countries in Europe, think about China that are thousands of years old, And, we get stuck in thinking, 20 and 30 and 40 years ago was our golden years. What are we going to look like in 100 years? What are our grandchildren going to expect? We have to think about, the investments that'll be long-term. When we look at city halls and, municipal buildings and our libraries that our parents and grandparents built, we have to make those investments again. We've gone 50 years without investing in sewer and water. We've gone 50 years without building beautiful buildings. And, we owe it to our grandchildren to make sure that we're building beautiful places that people want to live. And, where small businesses can succeed, it's really important. And that's why conferences like this are really important, because people from Lancaster can sit with people from Johnstown and even places as small as Tidiute. Can have conversation. What's working? How do you do this? You guys did outside concerts. How did you start them? And brainstorming. It's really valuable. And to give, Main Street managers and councils and mayors, the tools that they need to succeed in the future is really important.
I appreciate you taking the time. Rick Vilello, right?
Yep.
There you go. Again, the Deputy Secretary of Community Affairs and Development here at the Pennsylvania Downtown Conference. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great day. I'm really enjoying Erie. I think I looked at my schedule, and this is the 16th time I've been here in 11 years. So I get up here a couple times a year. It's really special, and I've seen the changes, and I'm really optimistic for the future.
I've got Spud here. He's presenting at the Pennsylvania Downtown Conference here at the Bayfront Convention Center in Erie. Okay, Spud, tell us a little bit about your story. And again, you were kind of the keynoter yesterday.
Yeah, so my work is all about how do you help people gather well, right? So oftentimes when we get a lot of smart people in a room together, we all sit and face in one direction and we hear one person speak at them. A lot of people can go do that on YouTube. And so my work is like coming into conferences and gatherings where people meet and convene to think, plan, work together, and how do we actually get people to turn to one another, because the shared wisdom is in this room. So that was what I was brought in, was like to rethink the kind of keynote model that so many conferences have. And then my heart and my work is really in like creative community development. So how do you do that same thing within your community, right? So rather than just have the people that are in positions of influence or power making decisions, how do you actually empower the neighbors, right? The people that like occupy the town, that this is the place where they live, work, learn, and play. How do you empower them to equally have their voice heard and shape what the future of a town could look like?
That's a little bit different take on like Richard Florida's whole, creating these creative, concepts where a creative lives where they work and that kind of thing, and you build these enclaves,
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer in like creating these like really tiny intentional communities within a bigger town. So I'm from State College, that's hometown, and so I run co-living spaces, co-working spaces, arts and innovation centers, but they're all these like micro communities where people feel deep sense of belonging, and when they feel that, then they want to help shape the narrative of a town. They want to help shape the next thing, the next venture, the next startup company, the next retail effort, right? Like they want to be a part of that effort in some really creative way, but they need to feel belonging as like the first step, right? If they don't feel that, then they don't have ownership in the game.
Towns like Erie, cities like Erie, we're dealing with generational change or generational turnover. A lot of the power still lives in the boomers, and I think we're going to skip over the Xers and go right to the millennials. What's your take on generational change and passing the baton?
Yeah, I mean, as someone who felt for many years when I was in my like young 20s, right, I was like trying to help shape our town in State College, and I felt like the baton was always teased in front of me. Like, here it is, come lend your voice, young person, and then it was never handed. And that felt very disempowering, right? And so I have a fairly stubborn personality, so I like persisted through that. But I think for most people, they just kind of like, you know what, I'm not going to give my energy or time to this. And like that's not the culture that you want for a region, right? And so I think you need to be really authentic. If like you're gonna put the baton out there and say, hey, we want some other ideas and some different energy, like you need to think, where does it make sense to actually hand the baton off, not just show it to the next generation. And that's not to fully do it in every aspect of your town, right? But find the appropriate places where to do that.
You've got some boxes and things. Talk a little bit about some of your tools.
Yeah, so I run a facilitation and strategy company, and so part of the goal is how do you give people really tangible tools to take a typical meeting, conference, gathering, strategic planning process, right, community revitalization idea, how do you actually make it really tactile for folks, right? So give something for them to react to, whether it's a powerful question, whether it's some imagery of like what might be, and then figure out how do we get to that future state. So so I often travel with just cards are falling out of all of my pockets whenever I facilitate.
Finally, I remember, again, 40-some years ago, when I was a college student, I thought that State College was like the perfect town for that 18 to 24-year-old, you know, the Haagen-Dazs, the bars and all the things there. How's State College doing, and what could they learn from a guy like you?
I mean, State College has a very tiny little demographic, right, 18 to 24, and then people leave, right? So we're kind of like this weird vacation town, right, where people come to vacation for those few years and then they're gone. And so we actually just launched an initiative called Rediscover State College, right, for people to rediscover parts of the town that they didn't otherwise connect to, maybe during that window of time when they were 18 to 24. So maybe you've gone off and now you've got a young family and you're trying to think about the next move. And so how do you help people rediscover a place through a different lens or a different perspective? So the town, I mean, for me, I've been in State College the past 20 plus years, and it's like completely changed. There's just an eagerness for like a young entrepreneurial energy. We want people's in, you know, the borough councils and all the different committees, and we want people that have different perspectives and ideas and to learn from the generation above us, right? So I think that like handoff between those two is like so important. So a lot of my work lately is like getting more intergenerational buy-in to the places that we call home. How do we help shape that from a multitude of perspective and years in the work?
Sounds like some teachable moments. I appreciate your time.
Anytime. Thanks so much.
Got Sean Fedorko. He is the executive director, manager, owner of Radius CoWork, now at what, 901?
900 State Street.
900, okay.
Yeah, the big glass building.
Yeah. I love that space. So tell us about, the move. Obviously, you had to get out of the Renaissance Center, which is now becoming the Trust Hotel. But talk a little bit about the move.
Oh, yeah. The trying to relocate our co-working community is a bit of a hurdle. There are, over 200 members, and on any given day, 60, 70 people using the space. And everyone's, of course, running their business. But we managed to do it January of this year, and we have been fitting out the space at 900 State, about 16 to 18,000 square feet. I don't know quite exactly, but
what kind of difference is that compared to what you had up at the Renaissance?
Well, we lost the extraordinary views of the 9th floor, but we gained this huge interior atrium space that's allowed us to all better interact and share space together more effectively.
Yeah. All right, and so talk about, again, remind folks the services that you offer and this new service.
Yeah, so Radius is the hub. It's like a gym, but for business. People get a membership, and they're able to come in, do their work, learn from peers, take classes, and access all the physical facilities you need to run your small emerging business. The new service that we have been able to craft in partnership with the EDDC is a business support coordinator. And we hired Janessa Norton, one of the sharpest business mentors and consultants in the region, to be a free resource to all the businesses at Radius, at the EDDC, and we've been able to extend that to include businesses at Erie's Black Wall Street, Erie Arts and Culture, and Bridgeway's Northwest PA MAID program.
That's remarkable. And we talked a little bit about this with Drew Whiting from the EDDC of saying, you know what, in order for businesses to grow, oftentimes they have that passion but don't know the business stuff that goes with actuating your passion.
Oh yeah, I mean, you might be the best chef in the world or an extraordinary artist. You might be a phenomenal lawyer. But you might not have experience negotiating contracts with vendors. If you're the person who can bake the best baklava, that might not mean you're the best person for structuring a tax-advantaged owner compensation strategy, right? Like you need to be successful at business, and so how do you get those resources and those skills in order to help our businesses not only, yes, succeed, we want that, but grow more quickly, because more growth is good for the community.
You've seen a lot of businesses launched from Radius to becoming, quite successful. What do you think is some of the secret sauce? Does it depend on the kind of industry that they're in, or is there some, overarching values?
I think the overarching value is the core philosophy of our peer mentorship model. You cannot do it alone. You simply cannot be an expert in everything. Self-sufficiency is the road to poverty. You need to lean on other people's strengths. That's the beauty of a marketplace. And what we do is we put all of those people, whether they are a web developer or a carpenter or a videographer or an attorney, next to each other. And so when they need to lean on each other's skills, they've spent 6 months, 6 years building deep relationships with trusted small business peers. Those relationships are durable even as they move out of the space, and that network of interdependence, of mutual support is just so strong. You take any really rock star and you put them out there alone, and you take a pretty decently skilled person, but you wrap them around with an entire ecosystem of skilled support. Which one is likely to survive and achieve more? The person who can lean on dozens of other peers and professionals.
Is entrepreneurship growing in Erie, in your opinion?
Yeah, it is. When Radius got started over a decade ago, there were 12 of us, and we kind of thought it would be really neat. Erie scale of about 25 people ultimately were in the co-working space, and now we're at nearly 10 times that number. And many of those businesses that got started in the early years are still here and thriving, and many of those founders are considering their next venture, or they're already on to an additional venture. And people show up every day.
I appreciate it, Sean.
Thanks, Joel.
With us here at the Pennsylvania Downtown Conference is Marcus Jacobs. He is the borough manager at Wesleyville Borough here in Erie County. Marcus, are you enjoying yourself here?
It's very good here. Learned a lot to talk about with Main Streets and their revitalization.
You just had a big announcement about the bridge there in Wesleyville. All the bigwigs came out. Tell us about that new development.
Yes, we were very thankful to PennDOT for getting over $1 million to go towards rebuilding a 100-year-old bridge, the Bell Street Bridge there on Water Street, which really connects our two communities. And a lot of that project actually plays into this conference here today, talking about how projects like that, connecting, improving the infrastructure, connecting communities, can really do a lot for revitalizing a community and helping with economic development.
Everything costs more. Everything's more expensive. How does a small borough like Wesleyville keep up with the expenses, operating a police department, and yet try to hold the line on taxes?
A lot of it is grants and collaborations with county level or state level agencies. There is a lot of money out there above us on a state level and on a federal level. People recognize that it's hard for municipalities to do this work, but there is help out there if you seek it out.
What do you think is the number one best kept secret about Wesleyville, other than Shaney Bill's, the music page?
Let me think about this. Best kept secret. Hinkler Park, let me say that. Right along the creek there, we have a beautiful park. A lot of investment has been made into that. An example right there, DCNR, a state agency, has helped us a lot with the funding there. But it is a gem along the creek, and a lot of people love it.
And the train shop's not there anymore, is it?
Unfortunately, the train shop is not there anymore. That was a fan favorite, I think.
Yeah. You actually have some really cool. It brings some cool diversity to the whole region. I think the Wesleyville Business District there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Curry Spectacle is a favorite. We have places like JDL Computers, which takes care of the borough's computers and helps a lot of our residents out as well. We got Yurkovic Plumbing. That's what you need. You got Terry Etzel's for a haircut. You have a lot of great businesses like that have been made.
Small motor repair. I can't remember. There was a fellow on there?
Yeah, I think so. That one, I'm not sure exactly where that was. Arnonesdale. The more that you think about it, the more there are. So.
Yeah. And we can't forget about Denny's service center there.
Exactly. We have a great Main Street with a lot of great businesses there, and there's a lot that the borough is looking to do, and conferences like this, to really revitalize that Main Street and make it look and feel as good as it is.
Beautiful. Thanks, Marcus.
Yep. Thank you.
You've been listening to The Joel Natalie Show, Erie, Pennsylvania's daily podcast from TalkErie.com. Subscribe to our show on your favorite podcatcher and get involved by emailing Joel@TalkErie.com.